Hello, this is Mark Lieberman, the host of the radio show The World According to Mark, being brought to you through WPVM FM in Asheville, North Carolina, streaming globally on WPVMFM.org. And today we're going to talk about an interesting topic. It concerns libraries. For all of those that used to fall asleep in the library, please don't go to sleep now, because this actually is going to be interesting and timely. And my guests today are Jim Blanton and Kay Wall. And Jim is the director of the Buncombe County Library System Committee. I'll let you embellish upon that, Jim. And Kay is on the advisory board. So first, I want to thank both of you for agreeing to be on the show today.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
So, I don't know how I thought about doing this. Well, I actually have an idea, but it's irrelevant. Let's talk about what's going on in the Buncombe County Library system, or what is it? I guess we should talk about, first of all, what is it? Most every city, burg, small town typically has a library. Libraries go back many, many years in this country. I believe Benjamin Franklin was responsible for the first free library in a place that I lived for many years, Philadelphia. And libraries have been a popular place, obviously, for getting books, sleeping, programs. But as we go through changes in technology, and as we've gone through the pandemic, changes are afoot, and any system that is funded by tax dollars is a subject to what do we do now, because this funding may not be available. How do we make things work better? How do we make people more happy? How do we spread the dollars around? And what kinds of changes have to be made, infrastructure, brick and mortar, and all that stuff. So why don't either one of you, or but one of you can start and the other can certainly add in, please. What is the library system we're looking at here in Buncombe County?
I guess I'll start things off just to give some basic details about our library system. We are a 12-branch system. We have the PAC Central Library in downtown, which is our largest facility, and then we have other community libraries throughout the county. We just recently, as something to note, we just recently opened a new library in May, the East Asheville Library, which is our second largest facility, which is about 14,000 square feet. It's a big, exciting time for us because we haven't built a library in about 20 years. And so it's sort of an example of the future of what libraries can be. It's a wonderful building, and I encourage everyone to go visit that. In addition to the 12 branches, we also have a law library that we maintain over in the county courthouse too, with legal resources for folks who need that information. Beyond that, we also, of course, are online now. That's something that's ever evolving for libraries, is the amount of information we are now able to provide digitally, which is very helpful during the pandemic because we were able to offer resources to folks who weren't able to come into our facilities. And that ranges from everything from books to audiobooks to music and movies, to research databases, which, for folks who are doing any kind of research, newspapers, magazines, you name it. There's just a wide breadth of resources available online now that we provide. And we'll probably talk more about that as we move along. We also do a number of outreach activities. So we have our staff works in the buildings, but they also go out into the community to different events to provide programming and information about our resources. Aside from that, and you've referred to the pandemic and how that's affected us, obviously that's been a really interesting situation for everyone, but for us in particular, as we've tried to navigate that and figure out how to best deliver our services to the community, during periods of partial closure or entirely closed. So it's been challenging, but I think we've managed pretty well to in some way, shape, or form maintain service throughout this whole period, whether it was through digital resources, through some kind of curbside service, to something that resembles more regular service now. So we continue to move forward. But it's like you said, it's something we're navigating as the situations change and evolve. And I guess that's a really quick overview of our system and where we're
That's
at.
great. Perfect.
So I'll let Kay add to that.
Well, before I leave you, because I said I was going to do it, you are a relative newcomer to this part of the world. You didn't come from too far away. You were coming from Kentucky. You are the library director here at Buncombe County, and you were the director in Lexington, if I have that correct.
Yeah, I was in Louisville. I'm from Lexington, but
Sorry,
yeah, and I did work at the Lexington Library for a while, but I came from Louisville most recently.
Okay, sorry.
At
least I didn't say Louisville, but okay.
That's right.
I could say Louisville, but that would be stretching my vocabulary. Okay, so you had experience in libraries, directing libraries, assisting with the library management, all the issues and more. Now that you're confronted with a different time period with Buncombe County, and you were not just picked out of a hat, you had to go through an extensive interview application process, and you came out on top. I don't know what it was. It could be good looks. It could be something else.
It's kind of you to say.
Okay.
I don't know. But I will say this. I'm very grateful to be here and thankful to the board for selecting me. I feel very fortunate to be here. We have a wonderful community and a wonderful staff, wonderful library board. County administration is fantastic. So I feel very fortunate to be here and to have been here during this particularly difficult time working with such a great group of people.
Great. So Kay, you also have an extensive background educationally and in practice. You have a Master of Library Science from Louisiana State University.
It's supposed to say go Tigers after that, I guess.
I don't follow football that closely. I didn't know it was a Tiger, but thanks for telling the audience. They probably knew. And you also got your Bachelor's of Arts in education at the University of Mississippi. I have no idea what their football team's mascot is. You can tell
Land
us.
Shark, something you would never know.
Land sharks, is that really a thing? I thought sharks lived in the water, but in any event, you have that academic background, and then you were academic program director at Clemson, and your resume is like 50 pages, not quite. So tell us a little bit about what you did before you got on the advisory board, which is distinguishable from the Board of Commissioners of Buncombe County. And the Board of Commissioners is who Jim actually reports to. So tell us about your background and what drove you to get on the advisory board, or how did you get selected?
Well, great. Well, thank you. Actually, I applied to the Library Advisory Board. The Board of Commissioners has sought out support in the community from citizens interested in libraries, and you don't have to be or need to be a librarian. As a matter of fact, Jim is more than capable of handling everything there. He does not need my expertise, but I do believe that he has the passion of several of us who care about libraries, have been either patrons forever and a day. But you can tell I'm an old school because we call them patrons. So that's kind of how I got involved, and I became a library advisory board member, and we indeed just advise. We don't get into the day-to-day activity. That is Jim's bailiwick, and he does a superb job. In terms of that, we make recommendations and so forth, but several of us have a real passion and a history with libraries. I've been a librarian for 30 years, so now retired, but interestingly, I came into the world of being a librarian when databases were first being, out there for librarians to use. I remember learning how to do database searching. That now everybody jumps on the internet and does their own thing, but learning how to use what was called control vocabulary and all those kinds of things, and started as a reference librarian. And I think the thing that Jim probably has enjoyed as I have is watching the positive impact technology can have on libraries in terms of access to information, and I'm getting it in the hands of users regardless of where they are physically. And yet it's hard not to, some people look at it as a biad. It's an either or, either you're in technology or you're into the print. Well, truth be told, we're all really a lot more into both areas. That technology supports the world of print. I still go to the library, check out books, read books, but I also, as we were talking earlier, Jim and I were, we have our Kindles that we do things on, and we use, audio downloads, and the services and the resources that the state of North Carolina provides all of its citizens, and Buncombe County benefits from that. And I know Jim can tell you more and more about that, but using Libby and listening to books, reading them on a device, there are lots of different ways we get information or access, whether it's that the reference desk, the people at the desk are doing email, chatting with you to help you find something. Just technology is really, it's advanced things or enhanced them really, because they were there in the past. So that's kind of my library road.
That's very interesting. So let me key off of a couple of things that you said, Kay, and also invite Jim to comment as well. So the provocative question, which is what I do when I'm trying to make the show interesting, is why do we need libraries anyhow? Before I finish, why do we need libraries? Aren't they archaic? Isn't it like the butcher shop, the milkman, the phonograph record, even drive-in movies, although there's been a slight resurgence in that. People don't read books anyhow. There actually does seem to be a fairly lower interest in reading. I was in a store yesterday and I mentioned that I lived on, well, I won't say it. I live on the name of a street that's named for a very famous American author, perhaps one of the most famous. And the woman said, I don't know who that is. Never heard of him. Okay, so lacking of interest in books, people not reading, but to the point a couple of points you raised, Kay, is when libraries were in their heyday, after they were in their heyday, I guess, I don't know, up until maybe the late 70s, late 80s, I'm not sure. People needed to go to a library to get books that they otherwise couldn't purchase, were too expensive to purchase, whatever. And, families took trips with their children to the library and sat with them, and it was great. Now, with everything that's available on the internet or through Kindle, as you mentioned, including curated services, in quotation marks, where you don't just have to pick things out at random. You can get a service which probably wrong use of this term, knows your algorithm, so already knows what you want to read, and does that. Why are libraries still important? And either one of you can start that conversation.
I guess I'll kick off. I think there's a number of reasons. One, well, just going back to what you said about algorithms, one thing that I think is really great about libraries as a institution is we've always valued the privacy of our users. And that's really kind of a hallmark that distinguishes us, I think, from a lot of these kind of services like Amazon, et cetera, is that we don't collect your data and make that available in any way or use it in a way that Amazon or other companies might do to better understand those reading interests that, to target users in that way, which I think is important to have a place like that where you can have that level of privacy still. I think that's unique to us in some ways. Beyond that, what you were saying, like the traditional image of the library, I think for most folks who like me, I consider myself old school too. I kind of have my foot in both worlds. The library I grew up with, primarily I went there with my parents, and then afterwards in school to just check out books, or maybe if I needed a quiet place to read, something along those lines. But they've really evolved into more of a social active learning space. And I think that's really important to recognize how, while we do still have those kind of bedrock services, we provide reference service, we have a number of resources available in print, whether it be books or magazines, et cetera. Obviously, in physical media, we have DVDs and CDs and things of that nature as well for checkout. We also provide a wide array of educational programming, and that's for all ages. One in particular, which probably many people are familiar with, is our programming for children, ages 0 through 5 in particular, doing like story times and programming of that nature that kind of prepares children for kindergarten and introduces them to those like early learning skills that they'll need to be successful later in life. And then, of course, we support youth throughout their educational and academic careers, and then onwards, folks who are seeking jobs and or researching business interests, et cetera. We know we have resources for all those things. So it's really a lifelong learning hub, and we provide programming that supports that. In addition to that, another thing that we do that's important related to technology is we are a resource for bridging the digital divide for folks who aren't necessarily able to have access to the technological resources for any number of reasons. And so we provide computers and software, Wi-Fi, all that on site for folks who need that. We actually just started a laptop hotspot loaning program, so people can actually check out laptops and hotspots for a month at a time. If they can't, come to the library and spend time at the library for whatever reason, we have that available now. So providing technology is something we do, and related programming, of course, is helping people understand, the very basics from using a mouse to how to apply for a job online. Those are things that we do as well to help folks. So it's also a place where people can come and have community meetings and gatherings that we don't curate. So for community groups, or if there's a particular topic or discussion that needs to take place in the community, we're a convening spot. And I think that makes us unique as well, and sort of a neutral zone, really, for people to come and have those kind of civil conversations and discussions and meetings that I think is also unique in the community. So there are a number of things that we provide that really go beyond kind of those physical materials I think we're all used to historically, where we've become more of a space for people to come and learn and gather and spend time with each other in a way that really not too many other spaces, provide that kind of resource. Some people refer to us as kind of the remaining town hall of the community.
Mm-hmm. Very true. I was going to say, tying into that is that social space is really important, and in college and academic libraries where I was, of course, a lot of times the library was indeed the center of campus and positioned for a lot of different reasons that way. The other thing I think about regarding public libraries in particular, because I did have some experience way back in my day with public libraries, is libraries are a great equalizer where people do or do not have resources of their own, personal resources. And so that public good aspect of libraries, I think, is really important to in how libraries function. And I know that our system is very conscientious in recognizing that need and seeing it as an equalizer. I know that when there are devastation type things and there are natural disasters, one place that gets going quickly, if at all possible, is the library, because that might be the one way they can get to finding out for, getting FEMA documents or any kind of social services help, that's really an important part of it. The other thing that I've seen, and we talked about as a advisory board, is the desire for libraries to remain non-threatening spaces, because people are looking for an environment that provides that opening to learning. And if a library has to be approachable in that, so that people feel comfortable asking questions and knowing that they are recognized as people and as citizens. So that non-threatening environment, the social part of that, and as a meeting place and not just a warehouse. I think that's the other that we've seen quite often. It's really important, is it's a place and a space and not just a storage unit.
I'll add to that really quickly that one thing Kay said there is really true. There are many instances where we're the only social contact a patron will have in their life. That is not uncommon. And so we really do, that's a service that probably doesn't get highlighted very often, but we are a social space, and that's not just for people coming here to meet with each other, but also to interact with staff, because that's their main outlet for social contact.
I want to reintroduce my guests for those of you who are just tuning in. That was Jim Blanton, who is the library director for the library system in Buncombe County, Western North Carolina, and Kay Wall is on the advisory board for the library system, both of whom have extensive background in terms of libraries and have contributed ably to trying not just to keep the library alive, but to make it more relevant, more vibrant. And what you both have been talking about certainly demonstrates that. So I have a number of questions that are raised by some comments, but let me just do a sort of a global question. You say, I believe, Jim, that there's 12 brick and mortar type libraries in Buncombe County, which is a fair number. And because it's Buncombe County as opposed to the Asheville, which is the primary city in Buncombe County, that suggests that money that is used to fund the library system comes from taxes that are levied or revenues from Buncombe County. So how much money do you have, does the library system have to support all of the activities? And is it trending upward, downward? Are you under some mandate, suggestion, recommendation, whatever, to try to economize that might involve actually, quote, reducing services? That's a complex sentence, so please feel free to start from the top. What kind of money are we talking about? Does it take to run the system? Where does it come from?
I think the short answer is that we do trend upward, or since I've been here, we've been trending upward. I think that's generally been true, and that's mostly just keeping pace every year with different, just various cost increase that we experience, from utilities to staffing, et cetera. Our budget right now is I think it's 6.7 million roughly. So I mean, we aren't under any
Financial hardship.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that we're flush necessarily, but we aren't under hardship either. And where we challenge probably the most, and Kay and the board know this as well, is we've been rebuilding our staffing levels. Yeah. To be able to improve our service hours and the services that we're able to offer. That's probably the area that we've experienced the greatest challenge is trying to improve our staffing levels. But generally speaking, we aren't under any kind of threat of, or request that we reduce our funding, anything of that nature. So as far as that goes, I mean, I feel like we have good support, and we've continued to build since I've been here. I was talking about staffing. We've increased our staffing since I've been here. I feel like we've had support from county administration, the commissioners, to do that, and we're very appreciative of their support, and we'll continue to work toward that moving forward as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jim. I was going to say the Board of Commissioners have really been responsive in a very positive way, and that's been really gratifying as an advisory board member to see that they're taking the library's needs very seriously, and that's I'm very pleased. I'm thankful that we are getting that kind of support.
So on that note, Kay and Jim, $6.7 million is a lot of money, obviously. But
it's got the exact one here for you, Mark. It's 6.619.
Oh, sorry.
536 if you need it, but
take it out two more decimal points and we'll have it down. But in any event, so 6.6 and change is still a lot of money, but you're talking about 12 buildings right now. Some of the buildings are older, and buildings are in constant need of maintenance and repair. and you've got how many, if you had to guess how many, you probably know, like how many volumes, if that's a measure, how many books? I remember when going to law schools would say we have 240,000 books. That was supposed to mean something. I don't know if it means as much today when you're talking virtual, but how many books are we talking about?
Gosh, Mark, I don't know the number off the top of my
It's a
head.
lot,
I really
though.
don't. Yeah, it's a lot.
It's
It's a lot.
Okay.
I mean, the PAC library, which I mentioned before, is our largest library, and that's where we have our largest collection. So when you go to the libraries of the community, one thing I will say about our library system, with the exception of PAC and East, is our locations tend to have smaller footprints if you were comparing it to, a system of a comparable size. But I will say this, all of our locations have really good use and circulation. They make the best use of their collection dollars to get those popular materials in the hands of folks who want them. We have a very good collection and well-used collection.
So back to the central question that I posed, or what I thought was a central question is that all the money that's available? Does the state chip in with some other additional funds? Does the federal government step in? And do you solicit and get contributions from the general public on top of that?
Yeah, part of our budget that I mentioned, that about a little over $200,000 of that is state support that we receive on a yearly basis, and that fluctuates depending on what the situation is at the state level. So we do receive some state funding, and then beyond that, we apply for various grants as they become available and are relevant to what we're doing. I mentioned that laptop hotspot program, for example. That was launched with grant funding through a federal grant, actually related to COVID-19 relief, recognizing the need that not everyone's able to come in or comfortable coming into facilities, and making sure that we can provide computer and online resources outside the building as well. So we apply for grant opportunities as those become available, and we have a project that seems viable and relevant. We also have a couple of support organizations. We have the Friends of the Library, and there's actually a Friends group at every location. And the Friends of the Library, people may be familiar with this, how this format works, but most Friends of the Library tend to work this way. They will do book sales. They receive donations, and they'll receive discarded items from us, and they'll sell those in the book sales, and those funds will then come back to support us here at Buncombe County. What that has been translated into is our friends have traditionally supported our library programming. So they would pay for things like presenters or materials that we might need to present a certain program. Then we have the trust board, and that's actually kind of and Kate can talk quite a bit about this as well. She's been somewhat involved. But that's an organization that was formed years ago, basically to collect or solicit funds for different types of projects that we might have that are bigger in scale than what the Friends of the Library support. Things like capital projects and things of that nature. They've also been historically very supportive of staff education. For years, they provided funding for staff to go and get their master's degrees in library science. So they do have these special above and beyond things that we aren't able to do as a system, that their support's really invaluable for. So those are a few different avenues of other funding channels that we have.
Okay, do you want to comment on?
I was going to say the Library Trust Fund is also part of the Community Foundation umbrella. Is that the right word?
That's where, yeah, the funds are invested with the Community Foundation. Yeah.
Yes. So it's a 501c3 that is, managed and so forth. So there are opportunities there. And but I think too, one that Jim mentioned was Friends of the Library, and that's a place where people can get involved with their local branch, and the Friends of the Library branches groups talk to each other. So there's communication there, and they meet together to talk about how things can be done. So Friends of the Library is always a good thing to have.
So we'll pick this up at the end to repeat it, but now that we've talked about it, where can people go to find out not only about programming, but what they can do in terms of volunteerism or to make financial contributions? Where do they go?
The best place to go is our main website, which is buncombecounty.org/library. And from there, they can find out everything from programs to how they can get involved, up to and including the Library Advisory Board.
Okay. So let me ask you this question, going back to when you came and you, I think that the prior director retired, and so you filled that slot going through the process. What was put on the table for you, or what did you find out the first day you came in that was of urgent need, and how many of those things are ongoing? And
Yeah,
then when we're done with that, I do want to talk about the so-called comprehensive plan. I'm not saying that in any way disparagingly, but everybody has a comprehensive plan. I think I even do. I think it's in my sock drawer.
the county just kicked off a comprehensive planning process.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we sure did. So.
But when you came, did they say to you, okay, not to hide the ball, Jim, this is what you're going to be facing when you get here. We have this, and this, and we need to make some headway on that.
Yeah, there were a couple of things that we talked about them in some extent. The first one was the East Asheville Library.
Right.
So that project was just about to kick off, and we were still going through the process of fine-tuning the design and getting the funding in place and understanding what the final budget was going to be. So that was a big project right immediately out of the gate. Another one, we had a renovation project too over at our Inca branch library. That building was expanding, and also we did some renovation on the interior. So had a couple of capital project related items right off the bat when I got here. The other one was what I mentioned before about staffing and trying to improve on our staffing levels. That was a major concern right away, to start looking at what our staffing was across the system and trying to fine tune and determine what would be optimal for each location to provide, in baseline service, but also looking to the future, in our aspirational goals, the type of things we'd like to do in terms of programming and outreach above and beyond just providing, kind of that frontline desk service that they experience when you come in. So really figuring that out and developing a multi-year strategy to get to the place we want to be as far as being able to provide service with our staff. Those are the big items that were shared with me when I came on board, and we certainly made headway on the capital projects, obviously, and we're, like I said, we're continuing to make progress on the staffing levels too.
One of the things I would say in addition to that is that, anytime someone new comes in, there's a lot of rethinking of everything. And Jim's done a really good job of encouraging the creativity from the library staff. Some of the programming, I hear director's report from Jim, it's really neat to see that it's people thinking creatively about how we can do things. Pandemic did force some of us sometimes to rethink issues, but this is different. This is more than that, because there are new ideas. The two of the COVID submissions I think are quite interesting. The Board of Commissioners has COVID grant funds that they've and there are two different ones. I love the one about the one Buncombe County mobile services, which harkens back to what we think of as bookmobile kinds of things, but ways that the library can reach people by going to them and not always being, passive in that respect, that the library goes their direction.
Right. Good humor trucks without ice cream. I got it.
Yes. Kids love it too.
Well, you guys are not only well-versed, but you're also unique in terms of who I normally talk to with government organizations, in that you're both very optimistic and positive. I was hoping, Jim, that just for dramatic effect, that you would say, well, when I got here, they said, well, we got this horrible situation that you're going to need to address immediately. And if not that, at least it's come up, and maybe it's come up with the comprehensive plan, which is there are things that we really need to do to support the library because, and maybe it's having to do with visibility of a library. As I mentioned when I first opened the show, is anytime somebody wants to close down something, there's always fervor. Even if it's a post office that nobody uses because they're all using FedEx and UPS. But is there a sense here that the library has a lot more to offer, and it could support why it needs to do that if there was more visibility, connection, raising the awareness of people who, may not use the library, may not have ever walked into the library, only walk in incidentally. Is there anything like that that's part of sort of the forward thinking? And again, we can start talking about the comprehensive plan on that as well.
Yeah, I think it kind of refers back to what Kay was just saying about the creativity of our staff and developing new programs and services. I think for folks who haven't used the library in a while, some of the things that we do may be surprising. And like you were saying in the beginning, if kind of there's that perception out there that, well, why do we need libraries necessarily? Because we can get books and information in other ways now. And I think that kind of speaks to what you're talking about, which is raising our visibility and helping people understand that we do those things really well. We do so many more things too that are so important. So I think raising our visibility is really key. And when I talked about the East Asheville Library earlier being kind of a model for our future and some of the services that we can provide, and kind of changing people's expectations about what a library can be. Because if you go to other communities around the country, I'll use Louisville since I just came from there. We were on a building boom there when I was in place, and the new libraries we're building had obviously the features you would expect, like books and computers and quiet study areas, things like that, resources you're familiar with. But we were also building in, like I was saying, like lifelong learning and active learning spaces. We had maker spaces that we were building into our buildings. We had one building we had a demonstration kitchen. Another building, we had an artist in residence space where we had an artist every month from different mediums. It could have been everything from paint on canvas to podcasting. And every time you come in, it was a different experience. You could interact informally with them. They'd do classes. So these types of features that really kind of take the library to the next level and give folks, that next level of service, really maximizing the investment that the community's made in these facilities. And East is an example of that. There's some features in there that we haven't had before in our existing buildings. One is kind of an all-purpose space that could house an artist in residence. Right now, we're just doing exhibits in it because of COVID, but our hope moving forward is that we can have kind of that active learning space over East. East also has a dedicated teen area, which is fantastic, and a dedicated children's area with a special room just for children's programming. So some things that are, and we also have individual meeting rooms, which we don't have in any of our other locations. So really building in features that I think people will come to expect more and more as we move into the future.
In the plan, in what the consultant did look at, part of that activity, and Jim knows, is that the commissioners did have the consultants look at the state of the facilities. What kind of condition are they in? And of all of and correct me, Jim, if I'm wrong, but of all of the county facilities, one of the worst ones was one of our libraries. So trying to integrate new programming in either inadequate space because it's too small, or because it can't accommodate aspects of new programming, can really, is really a challenge. In addition to the fact that when you don't have a lot of staff at smaller branches, there's a feeling of safety issues that needs to be addressed. And the ability to add more hours, let's just add 2 more hours. Well, 2 more hours might mean you have to have 2 shifts, and 2 shifts means you have to pay, and things, there are all kinds of efficiencies to gain, but also the ability to take advantage of newer things that Jim's talking about require that your space be the kind of space that can be used. And sometimes that isn't the case. Parking is one of the things that we hear a lot about all the time, is the inability for people to park, or if it's accessibility in terms of walkability, for where transportation might be an issue for people. Not just, I like to walk because it's a nice thing to do, but I have to walk because I have no other way to get there. So I think those are things that have to be balanced in all these approaches. But there are some really aging facilities that cannot accommodate the growth that we're seeing as a county, and those things have to be recognized and figure out, what's the best path forward.
So there's a number of social issues that the region is facing, the country is facing, and some of the responsibilities for addressing that fall on other parties, certainly other than the library. But you both have mentioned, or Jim, I think you've mentioned twice now, this laptop hotspot. I want to ask about that in a little bit more detail for a moment, because we've heard with legislation that that Congress is purportedly trying to pass and otherwise for years now, for several years, and particularly now with COVID, that there are internet deserts, and where people just cannot get on the internet. And of course, that became more of a problem as people were not going to, the public schools weren't open for in-person learning. But still, it's a question of, funding and availability. And then I think with this laptop program, maybe you're also addressing the fact that internet is important, obviously, but just having the hardware and then also being able to use it. So what exactly is, I know what a hotspot is generally, I know what a laptop is, but are you providing a place where people can, I know you mentioned you can give somebody a laptop for a month or whatever. Are you also providing a place where people who cannot access the internet from their homes can come and use the internet services that are available at the library?
Yes, absolutely. So all of our locations, we have computers for public use, and those are able to access the internet. They have Microsoft Office programs, and productivity software on them also. Those are available at all of our locations. We also have Wi-Fi for the public at all of our locations, and that also is true to a certain extent. If you're parked outdoors, and you have a device that you can use, you can connect to the Wi-Fi that way as well. Like I said, the laptop hotspot program is kind of an extension of that. Recognizing that our hours may not be convenient for some, or they may not have, they may have a certain thing they're working on, and they need that laptop and hotspot to apply for a job or take a class, whatever it might be for that period of time. So it's just like any other material. They would have their library card, and they would check out the laptop, and the hotspot is basically the signal, so they can connect to the internet via the hotspot. And then we have a team of folks, of our staff, who are on hand to help people with any technical assistance and troubleshooting they might need as part of that program. So we're there to provide support in that way as well.
I was going to say, I tried the internet laptop program just to see how well it worked, filled in the form and so forth, and needed a little bit of lead. I had to have some lead time but it worked, and it worked very well. So it was easy to pick up the laptop at, go by and ready to check out, checked it out. So the program works really well. So I tried it out.
Well, good. I have 1,000 more questions to ask, but I want to, again, first of all, reintroduce, that was Kay Wall, who's on the advisory board for the library system in Buncombe County, and Jim Blanton, who is the library director for Buncombe County Library System. When we're talking about, what's being done here in Buncombe County, what the needs are, and the issues that they're discussing are relatable, I think, to people obviously beyond Western North Carolina. I'm sure libraries across the country face all of the same issues of financial resources, staffing requirements, and working with the various municipalities or counties to access funds that may be available. But we've mentioned now at least 3 times this comprehensive plan. So let me just start from again from the top on that. Most organizations, and certainly most governmental organizations, have the obligation or the need in order to position themselves to have a plan. That's like a mission statement or a 5-year plan or a strategic plan. Yours is called a comprehensive plan. And it is at a certain stage in which there's been a consultant and the consultant has written something and there's been some feedback, but some of it was not available to get the feedback because of COVID and so on and so forth. What drove the need for this comprehensive plan, or is that just a feature of the way the Buncombe County government works with its various departments and organizations?
Well, in this particular instance, what happened was our General Services Department, which is responsible for all county facilities, was seeking to do basically a study of all county facilities to understand their condition and maybe look at space usage and how it can be maximized, especially in the wake of COVID and remote work and things of that nature. It was a good opportunity and time for something like that to happen. And they've been seeking to do like a comprehensive study of all county facilities. And we started having a conversation with them about the possibility of doing a little bit of a deeper dive on the libraries, because not only are we concerned about space, but we're also concerned about, our existing space, but concerned about the need to have more of it and to be used in different ways as we move forward, because our buildings a lot of menus were designed in a time where we had those more traditional services. And so like Kay was saying, it's difficult to reverse engineer the buildings to do the things that are needed for the future. So they were great. They were able to help us with that. So we were not only a part of the larger county study, we had a somewhat deeper dive where a consultant looked specifically at the services that we were offering. And I think you mentioned, and it was during COVID, so it was not, that timing was really not ideal, but did a survey of the community and also held community meetings virtually to get feedback on what community members wanted to see out of the library and what their expectations were, and what they saw as challenges for our buildings. And we received, and of course, they also did a kind of a study of our facility conditions, noting the kinds of things, okay, so how they're aging, and there's certain things that need to be improved or corrected. This happened at the county level, but it also happened at the library level. So it was really part of an overall county thing. We just received, like I said, a deeper dive into the library system to really kind of understand what our needs were moving forward. And so that took place, and then the consultant came back with a set of recommendations for each location and for how the system should be kind of organized as a whole. And that's where we're at right now. We're in a second phase where we're gathering community feedback in response to those recommendations that the consultant made. And in a very nutshell version, her recommendation was that our system right now is set up in a way such that we have a large central library and basically smaller satellites throughout the community, spread strategically, to make sure we've got service coverage. Her recommendation was that we move to a model where we have not just that larger central library, but also larger libraries spread throughout the community, so that there's access for folks who might not be able to drive down to Pack Library to go to a larger program, like an author event, for example, or as we build out these features, like if we had maker spaces in libraries, for example, something like that probably could only happen at Pack right now if we did it just because of space constraints. So it would be a way to kind of provide, equal levels of service throughout the county. And then we would still have smaller, according to her recommendations, still have smaller satellite libraries to fill in any remaining gaps to complement those larger facilities. And so that's where the general recommendations lie right now. And then each library has its own specific set of recommendations as to how big it should be and what kind of features and improvements need to be made. So that's a very short version of the study. And I'll let Kay say anything else that.
Yeah, well, I guess the one part is that it really, the initial intent is that focusing on facilities, and that no matter what you do, you always have the structure of your organization is always, there's an impact on it in some form or fashion. So there was the addressing of how to her terms were regionalize some of the services and the structure itself to increase efficiencies is really what I would think about. So
okay, so we had the comprehensive study. They published a report. Jim just mentioned that there were specific recommendations that were library facility specific. When, I don't know when that was published, but there's been some comment. What's the timeline with regard to, okay, we got this stuff, we need to continue getting feedback, but then you have to do something, or you could do something. And the study to this point may not be specific enough to indicate the extent of how much, again, I keep going back to how much money is going to be required to implement those recommendations, which I guess are ultimately the province of the Buncombe County Commissioner. So regardless of what the consultant says, and even regardless of what Jim and the advisory board suggests, the Buncombe County Commissioners will review it and they will say, nah, we're not doing this, but we do want to do this. And then there's a price tag. Where does all that stand?
So the recommendations were presented, I believe it was May, and then we started our input sessions in July. Right now they're on pause because of COVID. We started in person, and we were really, I think the board was, and I feel the same way, felt strongly that they needed to be in person. We offered virtual ones in the beginning too, just because we recognized not everyone can come to the library to provide input. But then, COVID intensified, and so we needed to go strictly to virtual. But I'm speaking on behalf of the board, and Kay can obviously, give her thoughts. But I think that we're all on the same page that we wanted to pause until we could do in person again, because we felt strong that was important to go out to the communities and hear from them directly for those who might not be able to access the virtual meetings. That's kind of where we were in the first phase of this, when we had those input sessions when the study started. COVID hit, and we had to do virtual, and just it's not the same, and not everyone can participate in that way. So we're paused right now on the input sessions, and I think kind of hope is we'll pick them back up, just as soon as this subsides and we're able to go back to in person. But in terms of what things look like, none of the recommendations are finalized in any way. That's really the purpose of these input sessions. We know what the consultant has said, looking at data and thinking about the types of services that were communicated through the input process that folks would like to receive, and those other things like we need more parking and certain things in the buildings aren't working for us, those types of things. So we understand that. From her report. Now we want to hear from the community to see what they think about what the consultant has said, to try and fine tune and make sure whatever final recommendation is made, it addresses those concerns and also aligns with really what the community expects. And then, like you said, the commissioners will be the ultimate decision makers on what the final product looks like, and that will tell us how much what a price tag might be in some respects. The price tag will even vary too, because the plan will play out over time, over a number of years. And I think Kay will talk about this, I'm sure, but it's like a roadmap. That's the term we use. It's a roadmap. It's not necessarily definitive, because when you get into the design process, working with the community to fine tune what the building should actually look and feel like, that's what happened at East. Very very deliberate about involving the community in that process. So we won't know an exact, we'll maybe have a ballpark, I guess, at that point, but everything evolves over time with a plan like this.
Very true. And I was going to say, in terms of how the Library Advisory Board and these additional feedback sessions, once the report had been generated back in May, there was concern. People were saying, I didn't get to give my input. And the commissioners were, very sensitive to that. So that was when the Library Advisory Board offered to just facilitate the sessions. And with the Buncombe County Communications Department helped us figure out how do we reach the communities, and scheduled, we planned 16 of the sessions beginning in July until October the 7th. And then, boom, we had three of them and face-to-face. And then we were back in restrictive environments, did as many virtual as we could, but pretty much by then we were hearing and seeing the same things, and we weren't reaching some of the communities we wanted to reach. In particular, we had not been to Weaverville. We had a conversation with people in Oakley, but we felt like there were and Swannanoa we wanted to have a face-to-face, and we had to postpone those. So we felt like, as an advisory board, that to do what the commissioners asked us to do, we needed to slow down, that it was more important to get the information than it was to do it quickly. And that way the report that was given by the consultant could be analyzed further and really thought about, versus either discarding ideas just right out of hand or accepting them. So I think that we wanted to make sure that we helped the county really look at what needs to be, what makes the most sense for also a longer period of time. Jim mentioned that some of these construction activities occur over periods of years in the report. So how does that play out relative to what's going on into where communities are getting bigger and bigger and spreading out, and just a little bit of everything. So that's kind of where we are as a group, is on pause again until we can get back face to face with people. I think that's much more important than some sort of decision on the report itself.
Okay, so we're close to the end. I did have one controversial question, which my producer may not allow me to ask. But one of the things I'm taking away from all this, and I hope our listeners, is how engaged you two are in the process, how presumably the rest of the board is also engaged, and how the Board of Commissioners are very plugged in to why libraries are important and why it's important to give the support. So I'm not going to ask the controversial question, but we'll have to ask it next time, which is, there's a lot of talk these days about what our children shouldn't learn about and what shouldn't be discussed, and whether it's Confederacy or the Holocaust. So we're not going to talk about it because my producer is still having a fit over here, but be prepared. If you have 2 seconds to say something, go ahead, but otherwise I'm going to get you to repeat where people can go to learn more. Then we'll
2
close
seconds
out.
probably is enough to address that, but I'll just say that we try to serve everyone. That's our goal. We're open to everyone, and we try to provide information of all different types, to satisfy the needs of the community. So I'll just say that we that's our driving motivation.
You got my vote. All right. I want to thank you. I want to thank Jim Blanton, Director of the Library System in Buncombe County, and Kay Wall, who's on the advisory board, for a very informative show. And as I said, I got more questions, but this was great. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.